Well, fundamentally, you know, what makes us human, what's determined our humanity has been technology. I mean, the body has always augmented its capabilities with tools and instruments. So this is not a new thing. It's, you know, technology is a historical human phenomena. And what we have here now is a situation where technology really begins to project human presence to remote locations, enables the body to affect physical action at a distance, reveals a universe well beyond the human scale sensory perception that we have, amplifies our calculation and reasoning powers. These are all technologies that enhance and extend the body in some way. And it's inevitable that we use them. So for me, the development of technology is one of external objects, instruments and artifacts that are separate from the body, that are outside of the body. These proliferate in a kind of explosive way. So technology inhabits the human landscape, but now begins to contain and condition the very body's regulatory rhythms. So as technology turns from the sort of the simple tools to the more complex instruments and computers, something else begins to happen, which is rather remarkable. Technology begins to be miniaturized. So it seems contradictory in a way that complexity comes with miniaturization, but this is in fact what happens. And miniaturization now enables technology to return to the body, to implosively collapse back onto the body. Technology hurtles back to the skin, sticking on the skin. The landing of technology on the human body is perhaps the most remarkable event in human history, unheralded, more important than sending satellites to other planetary bodies. Technology now lands on the human body. Even more astonishing, it's guided safely into soft tissue and hollow tracts of the body. So now technology is not a mere container, but now becomes a component of the body. And technology that's a component of the body triggers a new dynamic, a hybridization of the synthetic with the organic, a blurring between, you know, human and machine. So this is a remarkable development in the dynamics and the relationship of the body with its technologies. In fact, with micro-miniaturized motors and machines now, that can function on or approaching a nanotechnology level, we can effectively recolonize the human body with micro-miniaturized robots. Robots that would augment our bacterial population, that would perhaps monitor our internal tracts. These robots could be very simple. They could be actuated by changes in temperature or coming upon obstacles or a change in the chemistry of the body that might indicate some tumor or malfunction or clogging of an artery. So the notion now that soft tissue and internal tracts of the body become the new landscape for our machines is quite incredible. In fact, when technology invades the body, this is the end of Darwinian biological evolution as we know it. Again, we have this notion that the body is plugged into a kind of external network of machines or an external cybernetic system. But we have to realize that, in fact, technology invading the body means that a lot of this technology is going to be invisible. It's going to be invisible because it's going to be inside the body. And this makes a real difference between how we perceive the world. Technology is no longer merely mediating the world for us, because these machines will also be inside us. And whereas before we talked about symbiosis as being the result of the biocompatibility of the substance, in other words, what the technology was made of determined whether it was compatible to the body. You know, if it was soft, if it was sterile, if it was made of specific materials that were non-poisonous or non-reactive to body fluids. But now, it's not so much the substance that depends on the symbiosis, but rather the scale. If a micro-miniaturized machine is spec-sized, then the body will quite happily swallow it. It can be incorporated within the body structure. The body won't reject it. So it's no longer really the substance of the technology, but its scale that is the significant determinant of this new symbiosis, a symbiosis where machines become invisible inside the body. We will require an interface between micro-miniaturized machines within us and the surface sensory perception of the body, because the body can't perceive internally. I mean, it's not wired to look inwardly. You know, we're designed to be open to the world. We're not designed to be inward looking in terms of our body tracts and body tissues. For example, I could be sitting here with a tumour in my stomach and I wouldn't know about it until the symptoms surface, until I could feel a pain or see a lump or feel it. I really wouldn't know what was going on. There is this gap between cellular activity and human consciousness. And so, in a sense, we've got to rewire the body to cope with these colonies of internal machines. I think initially, micro-miniaturized robots will perform essentially exploratory probes into the body, and therefore we will need to perhaps either guide them through certain, I mean, they can simply be in the circulatory system or within a particular cell structure, but we may need to teleoperate them from the outside. We may need to visually see what they're seeing. So initially, you know, this will require some kind of sort of uploading of information from the micro-miniaturized robots back to the brain. But I know what you're getting at. What you're getting at is if these machines become so small and they become embedded in our own cellular machinery, then they assume a kind of primal, primary, genetic sort of standing. And they could be incorporated into the very mechanism of the body, and consequently there need not be interface. But I don't see this happening immediately, and these exploratory probes of micro-miniaturized machines will be what's happening in the next couple of 100 years. I think the aspect of of feedback or interface that results in, it's not simply a matter of wanting control, but at least being able to monitor and being aware of what's going on. So for me, there is a fundamental flaw in how the human body is wired. You know, it's essentially designed to be receptive to the world. But unfortunately, the world does not include the internal tracts and soft tissue of the body itself. And why shouldn't the body be able to monitor itself, be able to have an internal scanning system, to be able to detect malfunctions or tumour growths or clots in the arteries before these problems become very serious. No, we've spent 2,000 years in Western philosophy and psychology thinking of the body as a site for the psyche, for the spirit, for social interaction, you know. Whereas now what's going to be meaningful is looking at the body as a structure. And as a structure, the body becomes an object, not as an object of desire, but as an object for redesigning. And if we accept the premise that our awareness is determined by the architecture of the body, by the mechanism of our sensory perception, then if we want to have alien thoughts, we're only going to have these with a redesigned body. So the important thing here is the shift from seeing the body as a container of a psyche or a spirit, as in Plato or as in Descartes, to a more realistic and less romantic notion of the body as a structure which determines our very kinesthetic orientation and perception of the world. The body is designed to perceive the world, but unto itself it's a black box. And certainly, you know, from this is why we're fascinated by, Vesalius's drawings of peeling the skin back and exposing the veins and arteries, and Leonardo's anatomy and embryo drawings, and now all this electronic dissection, the CAT scans and the PET scans and the NMRs, and you know, these are giving us a new structural and functional understanding of the body electronically without having to resort to anatomical dissection or even surgery. And in fact, a lot of the surgical techniques now use fiberscope technology, where by simply poking the fiberscope through a small incision into the skin, you can perform an operation without radically cutting it open. In a sense, this seems contradictory, but at the point in time when technology is actually invading the body, you know, we are developing electronic techniques to evaluate and even operate on the body with minimal incisions, with minimal damage, with minimal trauma. ATT and Bell laboratories have made motors microns thick, the thickness of a hair, you know, a rotating working motor. Tokyo University is working on a 2mm diameter robot that you could swallow. No, with silicon etching techniques now we can etch micro-miniaturized gear wheels and spindles. But even going beyond that sort of mimicking of macro to micro machines, we're learning more about how very small things operate, how very small things function and work. and consequently, you know, the beatings of flagella and other you know, micro-miniaturized organisms are teaching us ways in which we can approach you know, micro-technological structures in novel ways. You know, the technology comes from the Greek word techne, meaning skill. So when I talk about technology, I don't necessarily talk about hardware. And when I say technology invades the body, I'm not simply talking about, you know, micro-miniaturized machines. Obviously, areas like genetic engineering, nanotechnology work, you know, on cellular structures. I mean, these sorts of things certainly will, again, blur any distinction between hardware and software, and will directly impinge onto the basic constitutional mechanism and matter of the body. So we just have to really reevaluate and redefine what we think about when we talk human-machine symbiosis. It's not simply technological hardware and human brain power anymore. It's not ergonomic design anymore. It's not technology mediating the world for us anymore. It's a radically new situation when technology lands on the skin, invades the body, and becomes micro-miniaturized enough to symbiotically become a component. And these are the significant features of the technological and human landscape that we now have to reconcile. Well, one can see evolution in various ways, right? I mean, the romantic view is that the body, with this form and these functions, this biology, is best suited in a natural ecosphere, in a natural biosphere. And this is what we mean by nature, and consequently this is what we mean by evolution. On the other hand, we can take a much broader view of evolution. Evolution has generated a species that has become reflective, that not only is aware of the world, but becomes aware of itself. And this it does through its artifacts, its tools, its technologies. So one can say that technology is part of a greater evolutionary picture, and that if the human species can't cope, can't become symbiotic with its technologies, and if this body can't accelerate to attain planetary escape velocity, and if this body can't redesign itself, then perhaps we can see it as a failed evolutionary experiment. It depends on your frame, you know, whether you want to restrict evolution to a carbon chemistry, or whether you include silicon chips and other forms of technologies as part of a natural development which has emanated from human beings. When a body like this one uses the word I, this is a convenient shorthand for a very complex phenomena. When I say I mean, you know, this carbon chemistry body with these organs and this form and function and behavioural repertoire and mental manifestation is embedded in this social system with these cultures and these rituals and this language. This is the only way one can give meaning to the word I. But we can't always explain this complex situation. I mean, it would become too cumbersome to keep explaining the actual physical consequences and triggers of events that keep collapsing and affecting each other. So we just use the word I. It's a very convenient shorthand for a very complex interactive phenomena. This is one of our problems of like trying to explain things. We try to categorize them, we try to polarize them, you know, male, female, light, dark, when we know there are shades of grey, you know, there are shades of sexuality. Why do we have to polarize and categorize? Why do we have to separate the body from its machines? In fact, the machines are appendages. Technology is an appendage to the body. It's now not simply external, but as you know, stuck to the skin as a prosthesis, as a component inside the body. So I don't see it as a simple development of now machines are taking over. What's going to happen is a hybridization of human and machine, and whether the end result is more carbon chemistry or more silicon chip technology doesn't matter. What matters is how we can perpetuate intelligence, extend it beyond into extraterrestrial space. I mean, if we remain as creatures simply on this planet, on this biosphere, then we certainly are limiting our survival parameters. If evolution is about survival, then intelligence is going to spread beyond the Earth into extraterrestrial, extended time and space. And then as soon as you leave the Earth, you realise, well, here's another pressure why the body has to be redesigned. It's ill-equipped to exist in extraterrestrial space. It has, you know, its longevity is inadequate to even to travel between star systems. It malfunctions often. It's susceptible to disease. It can't cope with the radiation we find off the protective biosphere. Its limbs, its sensory apparatus is not designed for these new realms of experience. When I talk about the body needing to become immortal, I'm not saying this in any spiritual sense at all. Not at all. The body has to become immortal simply because of its need to survive, of its need to extend itself beyond the Earth. So there should be no Frankensteinian fear of tampering with the body, of redesigning the body. And I don't think it's a Faustian bargain that we make with technology. I think this is a necessary outcome, an evolutionary imperative, not a spiritual yearning. Immortality now is a necessity. It's not so much a need to accelerate, but rather, let's see what's happening now. I mean, we've had this mad Aristotelian urge to accumulate more and more information. Information now that has become so fleeting, so fragmentary, and so specialised that an individual body can't effectively comprehend the information that it's trying to use. I mean, information has become abstract. When we talk about nebulas, nanoseconds, quarks, these are concepts, these are phenomena, these are subatomic particles that we can't really grasp subjectively. A lot of the information now that is scientific and mathematical is alien, it's abstract to our sensory antennae. We have developed machines now that are much more precise and powerful than we are. We have also been accelerated by technology to attain planetary escape velocity and leave the Earth. Now, these are the sorts of historical and and evolutionary pressures that make us consider redesigning the body, that make us consider leaving the earth. It's not so much that we have a need to do these things. It's not simply a yearning. It's not a romantic utopian expectation, but rather this is how I evaluate what's going on. And I see these pressures as affecting our very biology, because our very biology is inadequate. Our survival parameters are very slim. You know, the softness, wetness and complexity of the body would be difficult to sustain off the earth, off this biosphere. In fact, we have to hollow harden and dehydrate the body to make a new physiology. We can't do, we can only do without oxygen for minutes. We can only do without water for weeks, or maybe a week or so, a couple of weeks. We can only do without food for maybe as long as a month. If our internal temperature oscillates 5 or 6 degrees, we're near death. If we lose 10% of our body fluids, we're dead. I mean, our survival parameters are very, very slim. We're made of soft tissue, of hollow tracts, of subtle chemistry that will not survive, you know, off the earth. So what do? We have to consider a pan-planetary physiology, a physiology that will exist in varying atmospheric, gravitational and electromagnetic fields. Unfortunately, this body is only designed for this biosphere, for a 1G gravitational field, you know, in an oxygen-impregnated biosphere, which has plentiful water and lots of the sort of basic elements that make up our biology. This is not the case off the Earth. There are two strategies. One is to clothe the body with increasingly more technological paraphernalia so it can survive in extraterrestrial space, or we can re-engineer its biology so that it can inhabit uninhibited with a new designed body. We can either be master controllers here on Earth of teleoperated robots in remote locations, or we can be re-engineered explorers, you know, of the universe. I mean, it sounds a little grand, it might even sound sci-fi, but this is not the case. This is no longer science fiction. In fact, I'm not interested in science fiction. I'm not interested in speculative ideas that have no basis. These ideas have emanated from real actions, from sensory deprivation events, from physical stress suspensions, from plugging the body into extended technological systems, from performing, you know, with cyber technology, from teleoperating virtual bodies, controlling a virtual arm. Now these ideas are from experiences like this, and my only interest in them is seeing them manifested in some way, making them concrete. You know, an idea remains a fantasy unless it has some kind of physical substance. If we want to distinguish these things, if we want to distinguish Darwinian biological evolution, which we've defined as occurring over millions of years of time with random mutations and natural selection, that's fine. If we want to say that's evolution. And then if we want to say the development of technology is a kind of post-evolutionary occurrence, that somehow this will lead to an alien intelligence, that's okay. In fact, if you want to talk that way, the first signs of an alien intelligence, I mean, we're looking, you know, into the sky now with systems scanning the universe for intelligent life forms. In fact, the first alien intelligence may well be detected on this planet. Not on other planets, not in other solar systems, not in other stars, not in other galaxies. The first sign of an alien intelligence may well come from this planet. But again, this is defining alien in terms of the technological. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. It depends on your frame of reference, your window of perception. Up until now, when we think of extended life, we think of the word immortality and its spiritual and religious connotations. But in fact, we have to separate this from the word longevity. And longevity is the word that applies, that is applicable to this part of our sort of post-evolutionary development. Because unless we radically extend the body's lifespan, it will not be a creature that is designed for this particular cosmos. It's only a creature that has evolved in this biosphere. And to me, that's not enough. I mean, I don't know whether, you know, as creatures with curiosity, as creatures with some intelligence, I think these lead to extending and expanding. The question may very well be, why do we need to leave the Earth? Why do we need to extend our, you know, sensory antennae? Why do we need to have greater intelligences? But for me, it's not necessarily the bigger the better, or the more complex the more viable, but rather that we at least present alternate possibilities, that we diversify in form and function. In fact, it's time for human beings to vanish off this earth in diversity,